I got a question for you though, Jorge, in that you did your practicum over at Cristo Rey, so I'm sure that you saw some of that. You were part of the mentor program at Bellarmine. Now you're in the field as a therapist doing some of this school outreach and stuff. So like it sounds like you've been affected by it for a long time. You were impacted by it, and then you also are now giving back in it, in throughout different phases of your life, whether it was mentoring in high school to now being a professional therapist at an agency who's still going back out to the schools. So, what's that been like for you, man? Like you're bringing us this topic about school outreach and prevention and all that, but it sounds like that prevention's been a really big deal in your life too.
It has, and for the most part, it's because of, again, like what I started this whole episode on is just my limited actual participation in therapy, and I think as a therapist, it's kind of like on social media, you see how how it's important for as a therapist to go to your own therapy, like you have to have that personal growth, like you need to talk to somebody and process your feelings and everything like that. But that wasn't the case. It wasn't until actual grad school that I was going to therapy and really kind of diving into like that personal growth, that personal exploration. But, for the most part, it was, education was my outlet, and like being at school, and that was sort of what I was kind of taking care of my mental health during, like, as a way of participating in these programs without knowing that it was like kind of helping me out. I really wasn't like reflecting on like, wow, like this mentorship program like is really kind of helping me like not think about the anxiety that I'm experiencing, right? Like it was just more of like intrinsic volunteering. But more and more I started to realize like, I was going through a lot of stuff, in elementary school. I really didn't care too much about school a lot. I had recently been experiencing epileptic seizures in elementary school. So, that was a big part of my life that was, causing me to feel angry. It was causing me to, get in fights, not give a shit about school. And then I got to middle school. My mom put me into a private Jesuit school, like I mentioned in episode 1. And that was, again, where I first had somebody just check in on me. And then just somebody show me that, like, oh, you can go and help these people. And I think I sort of then, I don't know if it was sort of like avoiding my own shit by trying to help people, but I found some satisfaction about it, some gratification, as far as like seeing people like help. Eventually my seizures ended up going away. And so that was sort of like something that went. And then in high school, I think is when I fully like started to embrace my mental health and realize, one, my undocumented status and how it was like I was building my way up towards education and being like, wow, I'm finally going to break this cycle. And then like that hard fucking realization of like, man, like you can't apply for federal aid, you can't do these things. It's depressing, and I think I just tried to like focus a lot on just trying to give back to the community, on just trying to like do a lot of that. And as a result, I realized that, it was something that I felt really strongly, and I had so much experience just doing, just because I like volunteering. I like kind of helping out the community. And, as a result, I see like I'm going to be doing an outreach presentation tomorrow, a trauma-informed presentation for staff tomorrow as well. And, I'm like, man, this is, if I can at least equip more people, to sort of just have the tools to screen kids or to just like check in on kids, even at the elementary school level, like that's great for me, because I feel like if anything, I wish I would have had that opportunity. Not to say that my mom didn't provide that emotional support, but I feel like maybe, that's kind of something that I want. If a kid is going through something at that young age, I want somebody to kind of be able to kind of be like, hey, like maybe you can go talk to this person, maybe you can go do something like that. So that's sort of where it all comes from right now. I don't know if I answered your question or if I just went on a rant, but
no, I can see that though. I think I shielded a lot of my mental health and a lot of inner anger by trying to find by doing more in the community. Like if I'm not happy with myself right now, I think there's not a lot of things that I can control right now. And then you mentioned status, that's something that you couldn't control. So you try to redirect a lot of your energy in something that you can't control. And if someone's in a worse position than you are, and if you can bring a smile to their face, I think that was something that I looked into, and I can see that happening for you. Is I can't control that, but I can control helping someone else who's in need.
Yeah, exactly. Just sort of like Yeah, you said it perfectly, Jay. You know, just I don't have that control, right? So I can't really do too much about it. But I'm not gonna sit and fucking dwell on this problem. And I don't even know if processing my feelings was gonna be, you know, helpful at that moment. I feel like I needed to take action steps. Like I needed to do something about it. But now I realize that in retrospect, you know, like I feel like I could have benefited from just some like insight, you know, just like actual awareness of what my feelings were, as opposed to just completely just like dedicating myself to helping other people, you know, that altruism, that super altruism of just wanting to help people, right? Like I needed to help myself. And I still feel like I'm still doing that in a way, like I'm still kind of like reaching out and helping people. And I think that was the reason why I wanted to do this episode as well, just to show that, you know, that there is this balance of like you need to help yourself, you know, but you also have the capacity to, you know, provide that for other people. And like I said again, you know, like right now I'm not currently in therapy. I'm going to be inquiring about therapy soon, just because one, I've been taking some medication for seizures again, and all of that shit just kind of like flaring up again as far as what it was like as an elementary school kid. But you know, I do see how like it's for somebody working in this field and doing prevention work, like you still do need to do your own work, right? And I think that goes to that final question of like, what are some things that you're trying to prevent in your own life from happening? You know, like, are you trying to prevent some crisis from happening in your life, or you know, like that question that I left you guys with, you know, like, are you the kind of person that takes 2 weeks to complete an assignment, or are you the kind of person that just takes, you know, the last 2 hours of an all-nighter? You know, like what kind of things do you try to do in your everyday life to sort of try to prevent things from happening, right? Or, you know, or are you just kind of comfortable with, you know, that small window of anxiety and getting that work done, you know? Like, it's kind of like my question.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you brought up. The thing, like question you just brought up right now, it kind of is like I've been thinking about that too for myself. Of like, yeah, like, you know, as a therapist here, you know, and you know, yeah, we preach about a lot, like, yeah, the importance of therapy and stuff like that, and like, and for us, it's so important as therapists to like see a therapist also. And, like, I've been thinking about that too lately because like, I haven't seen a therapist in a while, but yeah, like just during the pandemic and during a lot of these things, man, it's really taken a toll on me, you know, mentally and emotionally, just, you know, and so there's like things that like, you know, you cope with, you know, and stuff like that you're dealing with, and I just realized I'm like, you know, me coping with like, you know, certain things. Like, you know, I think all of us have experienced, you know, maybe like drinking a little bit too much or, you know, whatever, and doing other substances like just to help cope. And like for me, I think, you know, it's not at a point where it's bad, but it's like I'm noticing that's like the first thing I'm kind of turning to. And like, so for me, it's kind of just learning to understand like, yo, like, okay, like I need to like work, I need to like talk, I need to talk about this, I need to go see a therapist, I need to like change some things in my own life because, you know, I don't want this to be the thing that like I'm coping with, you know, and you know, so yeah, you know, I think trying, like, I think in that part, you know, trying to find different ways and find different avenues to cope with, you know, and stuff like that, and so it won't get to a bigger problem. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't have to take like it's not like a 2-year process.
Yeah,
You know, like you can just go and see what you got to work on in the moment and do that. And that's always been the fine line between me. Like that's always been like the scary part as far as like I've always, you know, I had not mentors, but professors in grad school say, you know, like, you know, you need to be in therapy, you know, like you know, like you need to participate in something for 2+ years, you know, and everything like that. And that was kind of like a scary thought to me, just be like, man, like having to go to therapy for like multiple years, like, you know, like what the fuck am I going to talk about, like, or anything like this. But you know, to each their own, and however they want to continue to process their feelings. But I think you're right. You know, like sometimes just go in with what you need to work on, get that sort of like prevention work in, early intervention work in, and then just continue with your life, right?
Yeah.
Continue with what you do.
Well, then, and then there's also that door opening for long-term work that some people reach, you know, and I can attest to that where, you know, during my graduate experience, I mean, during my undergraduate experience, my godfather became ill, and you know, I'll be talking a lot more about that on the grief episode, you know, coming later on in the season. But point I'm trying to say is that it became a lot worse, and then he died, passed away in graduate school, and it really took me into like an emotional crisis for myself of just, you know, existential crisis, identity crisis, just being like, oh my God, like this avalanche of feelings and grief. And like I said, I'll be going more into that. But the cool part was with the CAPS program in the university, you know, SCU, Santa Clara, I was able to get 10 weeks of therapy. And no, it was not long term, but and I also did not click the best with that therapist, but I went in there with that goal of like, I want to see what's here, you know, and I know I'm not going to get to process all of it in these 10 weeks, but, you know, that's all that was free at the university. You know, there's no like, oh, re-upping or anything like that. But I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go in there with this goal. And it really pushed me to be able to then search for a long-term therapist outside, somebody who I've been seeing for like about, did the math the other day. It's been about almost 5 years now. You know, private practice and what do you call it? A lot of it's been working on my relationship issues, a lot of my anger issues from back in the day, resentment that's built up, intergenerational family systems and trauma that's been passed down from different generations. You know, I wouldn't say absent father, but kind of a, you know, distant father at times, you know, these intergenerational patterns. And I think for me, I'm always trying to introspect, especially in the therapy that I still do with my long-term therapist, about how can I break that cycle and how can I not fall into the same footsteps, or how can I be different, or is what I'm doing the same, and you know, why am I expecting it to have a different result? And you're just getting to a place where I get to ask myself those questions, you know, and that's the cool place of where I got to hand it to programs like outreach or just schools that have a counselor on site where you can go and you can start exploring, you know.
Yeah, so, you know, I think one last question I want to ask her, you know, before we wrap it up, like what kind of resources do you provide to these schools or parents or teachers? Like what does Alum Rock provide in regards to prevention and early intervention?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes from like the basic like flyers that Jay was talking about, where you just hand people flyers and you know, to just like a quick 5-minute, like during a principals meeting, you know, like you go in and you just like talk about 5 minutes your program, to some more in-depth like workshops and shit, to trauma-informed presentations to school staff, parents, to, you know, just random topics, kind of like whether one is a substance abuse topic, another one is going to be more about parenting, another one is going to be about setting boundaries, another one's going to be about self-care. So it's really great, and honestly, like I was really surprised to see that in our program, because I just see how much it's needed, you know, and how much you just don't really talk about it in other agencies. You know, I got my buddies that work over at Gardner, and you know, they have so many programs, but at the same time, like I never hear them talk about outreach, or I never hear them talk about being able to bill for outreach. You know, being able to bill for, like, you know, like cold calling somebody and being like, hey, you know, like I saw that you came to our workshop. You know, like I'm wondering how you're doing, and that counts as outreach. You know, you're literally talking about your services there. So there's plenty out there. Check out Alum Rock. Check out, you know, the website, because they have all these outreach opportunities. They have just you know, if you're just interested in fucking learning, as like going into a Zoom class right now because of the pandemic, and just like, you know, talking about like knowing how to use art as a form of therapy, or just knowing as a parent, you know, getting some skills, just some basic skills, like go and check it out. They're all for free, you know. If you're in Medi-Cal, obviously better, but it's free. It's free for people.
Yeah, man, it's advocacy work you're doing, you know what I mean? And you're doing important work, and yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, man. So it's cool.
Yeah, well, you know, thank you for tuning in and checking. We got the NQ music playing in the background right now. But yeah, prevention, early intervention, you know, it's a different type of therapy. It's a different type of intervention. It's a different type of mental health field, but it's so necessary, and it continues to sort of exist. You know, so tune in next week. We got Lou coming in. We're going to be talking about some psychedelics.
Got low ball Lou.
Psychedelic.
Got
psychedelic.
low ball Lou out here.
We're all
So
going to be on psychedelic.
We're going to be on something.
we might be on something.
Just those real conversations
Just
on
kidding.
Therapy House.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Don't call the BBS on us. I'm sorry. We're just kidding.
Like.
That's a wrap.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into Therapy House. Here to remind you to check out our link tree at linktree/therapy_house. There you can find all the links for our podcast website, the different platforms that we are broadcasting on, individual links to our personal pages. Like, comment, rate, and review our podcast so that we can grow. And, of course, subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when we drop something new. Until then, we'll see you next time.